Cabinet ministers are at odds over their duty and conduct in the debate on same-sex marriage. Eric Abetz yesterday led the charge for defenders of marriage between a man and a woman. He also argued that the Liberal Party has a tradition of ministers resigning if they don't publicly back the party line. Now, the government's leader in the House of Reps, Christopher Pyne, has dismissed any suggestion of ministerial resignations. He says Senator Abetz has not been helpful.
Going to the chapel and we're gonna get married.
And the Prime Minister's made it absolutely clear many times that everyone can have a different view on this matter and their views need to be respected.
Exactly right. Well done, mate. Good on you, Oscar. Congratulations. Yeah.
He has different views within his own family. Christine Forster, his sister, has a different view.
As the Prime Minister himself said, this change needs to be something that can be embraced by the whole Parliament, because nobody wants to see this being used as a political football.
You'll knock me.
We have a wonderful institution of marriage, and we would simply open a Pandora's box if we were to do away with that definition and say that marriage can mean whatever it wants.
Like what possibilities?
Polyamory, clearly. Well, polyamory is one of those.
Should we be afraid of polyamory?
I'm not sure I know what polyamory is, but it doesn't sound very attractive.
If you're a frontbencher and you cannot agree with policy that you should resign, the tradition is there for all to see, and I think it is an honourable tradition, and it is a tradition that I have tried to follow in my 21 years in the Parliament.
If that's Eric's view, good luck to him. He's entitled to that view. He should express his conscience as however he likes to express it. There are others in the party with a different view, and they also need to be respected.
The problem isn't that Eric Abetz and Tony Abbott are stuck in the past, it's that they want the rest of Australia to go back there and keep them company.
He has made it very clear that this debate should be conducted in a respectful way, that people's views should be respected and treated properly, and so calls for resignations are not helpful.
We should be allowed to have a debate in the Parliament and people vote according to their conscience. It should happen in the second half of this year. I suspect when it does, it'll be carried.
I also am aware that there are a lot of Liberals in the federal parliamentary party room who want to see a debate within the party. And frankly, it's my view, my personal view, that we need to get this debate over and done with.
Well, the Prime Minister's likely to have been oblivious to much of that because he's just made landfall after an early morning visit to a visiting US warship off the coast of Sydney. The USS Blue Ridge is in Australia for the annual Talisman Sabre military exercises with the Defence Force. It's a sophisticated command and control ship for the American Navy's 7th Fleet based here in the Pacific. Our defence reporter Andrew Green was on board.
USS Blue Ridge is the oldest deployable warship of the US Navy. It's the command ship for the US 7th Fleet, which has responsibility for the Pacific region. And it's in Australia for the Talisman Sabre joint military exercises between Australia and the United States. Now, this morning, the Prime Minister choppered in on a US Navy helicopter and he spoke to the sailors on board, telling them that their presence in Sydney was a comforting presence.
How are you? Great to have you. I'm Charles Woodfish. These are our spaces. Welcome aboard. How are you? Welcome aboard. Nice to have you with us. Welcome aboard.
Now, Australia, of course, doesn't officially take sides in the disputed territories in the China Sea, but the image of a decked-out Prime Minister greeting US sailors on a ship that's normally based in Japan and goes through the disputed waters of the China Sea gives you a pretty broad hint on where Australia's strategic loyalties lie in the Pacific region. Now, the Prime Minister has also dined with the Admiral of the US 7th Fleet and has reaffirmed Australia's alliances with the US in private briefings. As I've mentioned, there's about 1,000 men and women who are living on board this ship, and they'll be here for the next few weeks for the exercises on Northern Australia called Talisman Sabre.
Well, as the Prime Minister got his sea legs on there, the military theme of the day wasn't restricted to the waterways of Sydney. The skies above Canberra have also roared to the machines of war to mark a changing of the guard in military top brass. Some of the Air Force's biggest jets flew over Defence Headquarters and members of the Air Force paraded on the grounds. It was all to mark the official handover of command from the current Air Force Chief, Jeff Brown, to his successor, Air Marshal Leo Davies. Jeff Brown now heads into retirement after 4 years in command of the Air Force. Now, an ambition to recognise Indigenous Australians in the Constitution is fairly broadly held among leaders, both black and white. But when it comes to getting actual words and options for the referendum, delays and disagreements have been the hallmarks. A major attempt to break through and find a way forward will happen in Sydney on Sunday evening and throughout Monday. Indigenous and political leaders will be there to try to thrash out a timetable and to find some consensus. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island Social Justice Commissioner Mick Gooder will be in the thick of it. He's been talking to our political reporter, Anna Henderson.
We all agree that's the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people, the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition on a process that leads us to the formation of a question by the end of this year. And what I mean by that is we've got to actually have a broad set of parameters around a question, and then we've got to have a process of consultation with the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander community in mainstream Australia as well. And we need to get that done underway as soon as possible after this meeting, but then to have it completed and a question locked in by the end of this calendar year.
What's the significance of holding this meeting of the Prime Minister, the Opposition Leader and a group of eminent Indigenous representatives from across the country all coming together to have this conversation?
Oh, look, this is the first time in history we can find a meeting such as this has taken place. I think it indicates that the Prime Minister's taking it seriously, the Opposition Leader's taking it seriously, and indeed the Aboriginal people who are coming from all over Australia to spend a weekend working out our position and then have this meeting on Monday are taking it seriously. People coming, working out how do we actually get this referendum on recognition through, but I think we need to actually be fairly pragmatic about those processes we undertake to get to that question, and those are the discussions I think will take up the majority of the time over the weekend and on the, in the meeting on Monday.
How important are those discussions over the course of the weekend between Indigenous representatives ahead of those discussions with Tony Abbott and Bill Shorten?
Well, not surprisingly, there's a range of views in the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander community about this. But what we generally have are people who are committed to the concept of recognition, and what we've got to do is work out how we do that. And how do we manage disagreement within our side of the politics? And we're just like any other sector in the Australian community. We have disagreements. We have people who have strong opinions one way or the other. But I think what we need to do out of this is our mob come together, work out how we manage those disagreements, and then present a pretty united front to the Prime Minister and the Opposition Leader on Monday.
And how will you look at those different points of view and decide on a consensus? Will it be through sort of a democratic vote, or how will you actually come to decide what is the agreed viewpoint to then take to those discussions on Monday?
Oh, look, I think it won't be a democratic vote, I'm pretty sure. I think what it'll do is we'll work on consensus, so we'll work our way through the disagreements in a fairly mature, sensible way, and that's been my experience. I just recently co-hosted a big meeting up in Broome where people in that room had a whole lot of different opinions, but they treat each other with respect. They listen to other sides. They asked questions, they tested everyone, but it was done respectfully, and I think that's what will happen this weekend.
Now, earlier this year you spoke of concerns about this issue drifting and whether or not that could derail moves for a referendum. Do you feel now that things are back on track?
Oh look, this is a big step to getting it back on track, and like I say, an unprecedented meeting in Australia's history of the opposition leader, the PM and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders coming together is certainly a big step in getting it all back on track. And if we can agree on this process, on how we resolve our differences as we get towards the defining question, I think we would have made a massive step in the right direction of having that question really well defined by the end of this calendar year, leaving us to enter an election year with all of that settled.
Mick Gooder there with our political reporter Anna Henderson, and Anna will have extensive coverage of those talks on Monday and of the process that follows beyond it. Well, that's just about all we have time for today. Regular viewers will know that this is a somewhat shorter than normal look at politics today. The reason? Well, it seems the winter break has well and truly arrived now. Most politicians left the nation's capital at the end of last week, and this is what they fled. Temperatures crashed here overnight to -7 degrees, the coldest night of the year so far. The shores of Lake Burley Griffin, as with most of the city, iced up, and at least for a few hours, the freezers could be turned off at the local ice skating rink. Well, this will also explain why so many politicians head overseas in the winter break, mostly to the Northern Hemisphere. There are more than a dozen we know of who've left the country so far, and political activity today is about as low as the mercury here in Canberra. But that is it on Capitol Hill for the day and the week. We'll be back with more on Monday and with other updates from this Bureau as events unfold. But for now, we'll hand back to the team in Sydney for other news of the day.